Let the movie begin.
Jungle Beats, holla at me.
A daughter of slaves, Ida B. Wells was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi on July 16, 1862. A journalist, Wells led an anti-lynching crusade in the United States in the 1890s and went on to found and become integral in groups striving for African American justice. She died in 1931 in Chicago, Illinois. Born a slave in 1862, Ida Bell Wells was the oldest daughter of James and Lizzie Wells. The Wells family, as well as the rest of the slaves of the Confederate States, were decreed free by the Union about 6 months after Ida's birth, thanks to Emancipation Proclamation. Ida B. Wells' parents were active in the Republican Party during Reconstruction. Her father, James, was involved in the Freedmen's Aid Society and helped start Shaw University, a school for newly freed slaves, and served on the first board of trustees. It was there that Ida B. Wells received her early schooling, but she had to drop out at the age of 16 when tragedy struck her family. Both of her parents and one of her siblings died in a yellow fever outbreak, leaving Wells to care for her siblings. Ever resourceful, she convinced a nearby county school administrator that she was 18 and landed a job as a teacher. In 1882, Wells moved with her sisters to Memphis, Tennessee to live with an aunt. Her brothers found work as carpenter apprentices. For a time, Wells continued her education at Fisk University in Nashville.
Having bought a first-class train ticket to Nashville, she was outraged when the train crew ordered her to move to her car for African Americans. As she was forcibly removed from the train, she bit one of the men on the hand. Wells sued the railroad, winning a $500 settlement in a circuit court case. However, the decision was later overturned by the Tennessee Supreme Court. This injustice led Ida B. Wells to pick up a pen to write about issues of race and politics in the South. Wells eventually became an owner of the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight, and later of the Free Speech. Wells also held a position as a teacher in the segregated public schools in Memphis. She became a vocal critic of the condition of blacks-only schools in the city. In 1891, she was fired from her job for these tracts. She championed another cause after the murder of a friend and his two business associates. In 1892, three African-American men, Tom Moss, Calvin Dowell, and Will Stewart, set up a grocery store in Memphis. Their new business drew customers away from a white-owned store in the neighborhood, and the white store owner and his supporters clashed with the three men on a few occasions. One night, Moss and the others guarded their store against attack and ended up shooting several of the white vandals. They were arrested and brought to jail, but they did not have a chance to defend themselves against the charges. A lynch mob took them from their cells and murdered them. This led to her writing articles decrying and lynching of other African Americans, putting her own life at risk. She spent 2 months traveling in the South, gathering information on the other lynching incidents. A mob stormed the office of her newspapers, destroying all of her equipment. Fortunately, Wells had been traveling to New York City at the time. She was warned that she would be killed if she ever returned to Memphis. Staying in the North, Wells wrote an in-depth report on lynching in America for the New York Age, an African-American newspaper run by former slave T. Thomas Fortune. She lectured abroad in 1893, looking to drum up support for her cause among reform-minded whites. Upset by the ban on African-American exhibitors in 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, Wells penned and circulated a pamphlet entitled "The Reason Why a Colored American is Represented in the World's Columbian Exposition." This effort was funded and supported by famed abolitionist and free slave Frederick Douglass and lawyer and editor Ferdinand Barnett. Also in 1893, Wells published a Red Record, a personal examination of lynchings in America. In 1898, Wells brought her anti-lynching campaign to the White House, leading a protest in Washington, D.C., and calling for President William McKinley to make reforms. She married Ferdinand Barnett that same year and was thereafter known as Ida B. Wells Barnett. While the couple eventually had 4 children together, Wells remained committed to her social and political activism.
Ida B. Wells established several civil rights organizations. In 1896, she formed the National Association of Colored Women. After brutal assaults of the African American community in Springfield, Illinois in 1908, Wells sought to take action. The following year, she attended a special conference with W.E.B. Du Bois, who perhaps was her closest friend, for the organization that would later become known as the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People. Working on the behalf of all women, Wells, as part of her work with the National Equal Rights League, called for President Woodrow Wilson to put an end to discriminatory hiring practices for government jobs. Ida B. Wells died of kidney disease on March 25, 1931, at the age of 69 in Chicago, Illinois. She left behind an impressive legacy of social and political heroism. With her writing, speeches, and protests, Wells fought against prejudice no matter what potential danger she faced.
Die fighting against injustice than to die like a dog or a rat in a trap.
Ida B. Wells Barnett, a mother, wife, teacher, journalist, editor, anti-lynching crusader, freedom fighter.